It is August 31st, 2020. This is Atlanta United FC Weekly, a Home Before Dark podcast. Nobody else? Yeah.
Nope.
The cork popping.
I ruined it.
I tried.
I am Tim Herb. As always, I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Mr. Kevin Bradley. Below me, Dan James. To my, I can never get the mirroring right. To my right.
Don't worry about it.
And we're joined by a special guest, the Athletics' Felipe Cardenas. Thank you so much. It's been a long time in the making, I feel like.
It has, and we've DM'd a lot, and I credit your persistence. And getting me here was a big deal. I kept saying, let's try next week. Let's do next week. But happy to finally.
That's how he met his wife.
Exactly. Yeah, that is how I met my wife. Thank God for the internet.
His DM game is strong.
Nothing if not persistent. Thank you guys for taking time out of your busy Monday night in the Atlanta area. It's finally not raining for the first time in what feels like 2 weeks. I don't know what, I don't want to jinx it, but if you guys are watching us on YouTube, make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button, the notification bell icon. Make sure you guys watch us every Monday night live at 8 p.m. Join what we call the Trap, the live chat. If you guys are listening to us on iTunes, podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, all that good stuff, leave us a rating and or review. We will read it live on the show. Housekeeping's out of the way.
What a difference a week makes.
What a difference playing a team with a winning record makes. Some may argue.
That's
very true. I mean, we're coming off a very eventful past week. I mean, we had the build up, obviously coming off of a win against Nashville, going into a midweek fixture against Miami that ultimately didn't happen, and for good reason. And then coming into Saturday, it's kind of hard to know what to expect. It's like you had all that build up, you had a lineup, and the team sheet was announced, everybody came out, and then kind of got swept from underneath us again for good reason.
Not for Dan. He bought the Miami jersey, I see. It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. But then going into Saturday, we were so pumped up. I felt like going into that game on Wednesday. I'm struggling. And I'll kick it to you first, Felipe, but I'm struggling right now because we've talked about this the past couple of weeks, not knowing what to expect from this team in terms of is this the coaching direction from the front office that we should be expecting moving forward? Like, what happens if, a manager comes in that's different than Stephen Glass in the way that he's playing? Is he going to be forced to play a certain way? Like, how does that fit in? Like, is this ultimately a tryout for a lot of the players? How much stock is there in the rest of the season? I really just, I don't know how you
are. You entertained? Is this exciting soccer for you? All the typical questions that the fan base is asking right now.
You know what? And they're all extremely valid points. I think if I were to take your question and break it up, I could answer each one. But I think in general, this is a strange year. It was already a weird year, and it got even stranger for Atlanta United when they let go of Frank de Boer. I mean, clearly it wasn't working under Frank, despite the fact that he had won a couple. He won the trophies. But I think we know now. Now we know the story. We know why it didn't work. We know what was going on in the locker room. And the reason I bring that up is because I think that it's still there. It's still kind of lingering, that transition from Frank to Stephen Glass. Tactically, what is Glass trying to do? Tactically is what Frank was doing for the last 19 to 20 months, still kind of stuck and embedded in these players. They can't just hit the switch, the on-off button and be like, all right, now we're playing for Stephen Glass. It wasn't that easy, even when Frank replaced Tata Martino. So, I think going into Wednesday night, I agree. I think both teams, Atlanta and Inter Miami, were excited for that game. It was kind of a big game for both clubs. The first meeting between the two teams, plenty of storylines there. Two clubs that I think want to eventually be two of the biggest clubs in North America, but two clubs that are clearly struggling at the moment. And then you had the Leandro Gonzalez Perez storyline. Breck Shea, Mikey Ambrose, several former Atlanta United players that were probably getting ready to play, against their former club. So I think it was set up for a big match. It gets postponed. There's a walkout. We know what happened there. But don't forget, Orlando played their match. They played against Nashville. So they come into Saturday. And I think, I asked Stephen Glass this afternoon. I even asked Brad Guzan before the match against Orlando about, just how do you prepare for these games when you're missing matches? You don't have the time to train like you thought you would. And I think, I get it. They don't want any excuses. They don't want to say that it's hard when you have a game that gets canceled and you don't have enough time to train. You have a new coach. But clearly, I think that was part of that performance on Saturday. Orlando came in. They just played a match. They were able to rest players. They rested their DP. They rested 2 of their DPs. And they were very well coached. And Atlanta looked like they slept walk for 45 minutes. And it looks like clearly they're still getting used to their new manager. So that is, to your point, I think that will continue for the time being. When they play Miami on Wednesday night, again, who has the momentum? I would give the edge a little bit to Inter Miami. They just lost to Nashville, but even though they're 1-6 or something like that, like you can see that there is an idea there. There is a tactical idea. Atlanta's still trying to figure out what they want to do this year.
I guess that's the frustrating thing for me is that I feel like it's just constantly like, oh, it's because of this, it's because of that. And it just seems like grasping at straws. Like, we didn't play a game. Well, it could have easily been, well, you played a game, and then it's, well, we didn't have enough rest. It's any way you cut it, it just seems like grasping at straws to try to make sense of things rather than players sort of taking some ownership. And I think that's a little bit frustrating. It's just like, you can't rest on the manager not being there anymore. And it's like, okay, you want to talk about the interim coach being the issue. Well, that's when the players need to take that initiative and ownership to be the leaders, essentially, even though they do have this interim coach.
Yeah, I don't think Stephen Glass can be blamed.
Not at all.
He was put into this position, a very
exactly.
Position. I think the one thing that you can perhaps, if we're going to point fingers at Stephen Glass, is, hey, and we asked him this afternoon, like, why wasn't the team ready for that first half? Like, it was a rivalry match. I know it's different optics, no fans, strange, COVID era that we're living in. But still, it was Orlando. You're at home, I guess. And they weren't ready to play. And so I think Stephen Glass spoke to that. He kind of sent the message that they should be ready. They should have been ready to play. They woke up in the second half. But, I agree with you, Kevin. I think that accountability does have to go across the organization. That includes the players. We can start from the very top. The decisions that were made over a year ago, those decisions to hire Frank DeBoer, to kind of flip everything that was working here at the club, flip it on its head, and then hope for this long-term vision of total football and football evolution and the methodical possession and the pipeline that Ajax did. We're going to bring that over here. It just, now those decisions, which clearly did not work, are trickling down and affecting everyone involved, from the interim manager to the players that are on the field, the new players coming in that are like, whoa, what did I walk myself into? And so I think there has to be a point where, and it starts with every game. I think with Atlanta United, before you knew what you're going to get, you had Joseph, you don't have Joseph now. And so like you have all these different players, they're younger. And let's be honest, like I think this is the part that Atlanta United fans like don't want to hear. They're not as talented. Okay. It's not a bad team though. Like there's still
not at all.
Tons of talent. But overall, when you look at the 2018 team that won the Cup, MLS Cup, the 2019 team that almost went to a second consecutive MLS Cup, compared to what the current roster is, clearly some big-time players have left, big-time players that were like mentally super important in that locker room. Tactically, they were brought in here to play a certain way, and now they're gone. So now you're asking all these different players to kind of assume that responsibility, and it's just not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen.
No.
Yeah, it's an interesting point with what you said about the effects of swapping coaches is still sort of lingering in the locker room. It's like when you're at work and they change your process, and then you're still saving things in the wrong place because you're not used to the process yet. So I think that resonates with me quite a lot. Plus with, all the other issues we've been dealing with in 2020. I mean, murder hornets, are they still out there?
I think
the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I look at, Manuel Castro. Before he came in, it took him a while to get his visa after everything was arranged.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was training by himself. And then he came in, played like 15 minutes against Club America in the Azteca. And then we went on hiatus for a while. Thankfully, well, maybe for his benefit, they extended his loan. But I wonder if he just seems like more of a poster child of what a mess this year has been. Like, how on earth can he be successful in this situation? Then you push it out to all the other players who may have more experience within the team, but still, after the upheaval from last year, just sort of flowing on through into this year, it does, to me, it seems like this season is basically a wash from here.
Those are all great points. Let me start with Manuel Castro, because I think he's an important player to focus on for all those things that you just said and others. First of all, he had not been training. So when did he arrive? Before pandemic. So let's say
it was like February, I believe.
February, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
A month prior to that in Argentina with Estudiantes de La Plata, he wasn't training then either.
Right.
The club had told him, "You're moving. We're going to send you on loan to Atlanta United. You're not playing in any more games. You're not scrimmaging." So they're protecting that investment. And he told me when I talked to him for that feature a couple months ago, that's tough for any player, even if they know that they're moving and it could be a great opportunity. They want to play. They want to be involved. And so he was not involved. He gets here, like you said, he plays in a couple minutes or 15, 20 minutes against Club America. But that's where you realize that, Frank de Boer didn't recruit him. Frank de Boer didn't scout him. I think that's an example of a scouting department coming to the coach and saying, "Hey, we have this player. We have an opportunity to bring this player on from Argentina. He has similar attributes to I guess, Tito Villalba. That was what the front office and even Frank de Boer compared Manuel Castro to. But I think even in speaking to Frank de Boer a couple of weeks ago for the exclusive that I did, he basically told me, like, I was trying to figure out where he could play, like what was his best position. I started him in Orlando as a number 9. And Castro is not a striker. He's not a number 9. I think he's a front 3 attacker, but clearly he's a little bit more comfortable close to the touchline or just in a hybrid role. I think so. He still doesn't seem like a great fit for this team. Doesn't mean he's not a good player. Doesn't mean he can't be a good player. But I think to your point, what you mentioned, it's like these decisions are now the player, he's still stuck here. The manager's gone. A new manager's in. Where will Steven Glass put him? Glass put him on. He started him out wide on the right flank against Orlando. He looked a little bit more comfortable, but still isn't finishing his chances. So it's a tough spot for those players. I
think you can argue that for half of the lineup, though. At this
for
point,
a lot of it,
it's I mean, one of our major DPs looks that way half the time. It's frustrating to see that from an organization that, while yes, the manager has rotated out over the past few seasons, like you would hope to see a little bit more out of the front office with the signings and the players taking the reins to say who and how this formation and this attacking, exciting football that they all want to play is going to take shape. And I'm struggling to see how that's going to take shape at all this year at this point.
Yeah. Pizzi Martinez, again, he's just never been settled, and I think, and I think he against Motagua when he had that, those, was it 2 goals against Motagua here at Kennesaw, when he was talking to reporters in the mix zone, and he basically admitted that he was not in a good place mentally when he first got to Atlanta, which was great. It was very eye-opening. It's great to see a guy like be honest with everybody, and he was like motivated. Now you're going to see the right PT. Then the 4-month stoppage happens with COVID. And now the coach is gone, and you're wondering if Pizzi Martinez can end up being the DP that everyone expected him to be. But these situations aren't helping him, to your point.
No, not at all.
You can't expect him to just, carry the team. I think what I'm getting from Stephen Glass is that he has this like trifecta of challenges. Like, how do you motivate a team that clearly just went through something not traumatic, but like pretty dramatic from Orlando? Not winning a game, not scoring a goal. Clearly the situation got toxic with DeBoer. Then DeBoer gets let go. And so he has to motivate them to believe in themselves again. But he doesn't have Joseph. He doesn't have all these core players that he thought he would. At the same time, he's trying to figure out what shape works. Like, what shape can I put this team in where we're competitive, we're playing exciting soccer, we're attacking. So, yeah, it's perhaps tough to call the year a wash, but it's going to be that type of year where every game is like, is this the game where they're going to play a complete game? Because Nashville wasn't a great performance. Stephen Glass told us this afternoon, he was like, it wasn't like we played great against Nashville. I think they just got the win that they needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and who's going to be that person for Atlanta, right? Like, we all know Joseph's out, but there's still veteran players on this team, and it looked like with Frank's exiting that Brad Guzan was going to take that role, and he was the one really sort of speaking up on the players' behalf and was really sort of on the positive outlook for players taking control and him sort of cementing himself as that leadership individual. And I don't know that necessarily that's the case anymore. Again, it's just this sort of shifting and rearranging at any sort of site of adversity that you need to have somebody that's going to be that bedrock regardless of win, lose, or draw,
Yeah, I feel like that's like our only chance to get back to some level of homeostasis under a caretaker, right? Is you have to have a couple guys step up that are really going to take the mantle, and like they're going to be the ones that even out the locker room, that get players on the same page, that break the muscle memory, as Felipe is talking about, of playing under Frank DeBoer and getting them out of that mentality. I think, if not the caretaker manager, right? It's not, again, I don't think we said it before, we're not really expecting him to be a world beater of a manager. Like, we're not expecting him to be the guy who controls and pulls all the strings and everything and steps up for these players. But I mean, if not for a couple veteran leaders on this team, then who at this point? Because Stephen Glass has really been brought into, he's been asked to do a job while they search for a permanent manager. It really is incumbent on those more veteran players, Brad Guzan, or watch somebody like Eric Rometti step up against Nashville, but then see the inconsistencies on Saturday of what happens.
And they've got to take ownership of that inconsistency. Like, that's the thing about Joseph as that leader for the team, is him not only being disappointed in his own performances whenever he's not living up to his own expectations or the expectations of the fans on his performance, but also on his teammates, and keeping them in line and then taking that responsibility. Like, you can't just have all the gratitude and accolades whenever it's going well and complain about everything that's out of your control whenever it's bad. But then whenever you're responsible for that, and your teammates are too, to just shrug that off and not take ownership of that as well. And that's what we need right now more than ever.
I think it's also, we don't have, like you were saying earlier, we don't have those leaders in the outfield. I mean, Guzan's great. It was great hearing him playing against Nashville, where he was directing all the players, and he was like, George block that cross, and Bello blocked the cross, and he was directing the guys, and you could hear that. But then you would think, well, Lorenowitz would be the guy who could be that leadership out further in the field, but he's not there. He can't go 90 minutes or maybe even 45 at this point. So you're kind of looking for someone in that final third who can kind of be one to sort of gather up the team and try and motivate them on the field, because you're not going to be able to get that from Guzan. No, maybe he'd be damn with his TikTok presence. He's got that Ted Lasso positive reinforcement thing going on.
They should let Jurgen Damm play with his cell phone on.
Yeah, they absolutely should. That's a really good point.
No, I agree. I think Brad Guzan, like to Kevin, your point, it is going to be Brad Guzan. He was the captain last season. He's still the captain. Jeff Florinowitz is another captain, and Frank de Boer told me, which I thought was interesting, that PT Martinez had elevated himself to like a third co-captain. So, but I agree. Like Brad Guzan, who's been very vocal, he was very vocal after that last loss to Columbus in the MLS back tournament. He was like the guy that was like, we need to change. Like we need something. Like just calling everybody out. But yeah, it can't just be him. And it's not like, oh, because he's the goalkeeper. But yeah, I think this is a team that wants to be an attacking team. So it's natural for like a 10 or a 9 to be that guy that's like, that has that attitude. And this is just more proof that Joseph Martinez is irreplaceable. You know, like even Frank de Boer told me in that one-on-one that I had last week was that, you know, the importance of Joseph Martinez. Yes, he should not walk out of practice, basically, is what Frank de Boer told me. He should not do that because that's not the example that he should set for the rest of the team. But he understands.
Do you think that was the straw that broke the camel's back? Like, do you think that it was seeing that leader walk out of practice that sort of instigated the rest of the locker room kind of taking up arms against Frank de Boer?
I don't think that was the straw. It was a big deal though. I mean, when you have your two DPs, PT and Joseph Martinez, visibly frustrated with the manager and leaving practices, that's not good for any locker room. Doesn't matter how much you're winning, doesn't matter how good you are. But Joseph, you know, even his faults, I guess, if you can call that a fault, where he gets so frustrated with his teammates that he doesn't want to practice. Still, you know, I've heard from players like Justin Merrim that was on the team last year. He told me, man, like Joseph, like will just like get everyone focused, even if it's like because he's yelling at you, and even if his expectations are too high, and you in the moment in a game you're like, dude, chill out. You understand like why he's doing it. Frank told me the same thing. Like he even gets the coaches ready with that attitude. So they don't have that right now. They're not going to get that from anyone. Even if PT Martinez wants to be that guy, I feel like similar to Joseph, he has to be playing well in order for him to be that guy. If he's not, then his body language, his attitude is not going to be the one that's like firing everybody up. So yeah, that's a big miss right now. It's a big hole.
Yeah, I want to go to the trap real quick. We haven't pointed out much in there tonight. We got a couple new faces, Felipe. You bringing them to us? Gustavo Rodriguez down in Buenos Aires.
I retweeted.
Yeah, Gustavo was able to join us live finally. We got Adam Mulligan, Brittany S., Bill Holcomb, our buddy Ron Pena, and Percy Herrera fighting in the trap. It's no different than what they do on Twitter all day, every day. Stephen Perales and Michelle and Edgar Ochoa. So some people are talking about kind of that veteran leadership, that vacuum. And Bill Holcomb brings up, he said, how much of that stepping up is filling in Parkhurst's shoes. He said, I feel like we missed that a lot. I think that's kind of a big one. I mean, he was like, I felt like he was definitely the calming presence, at least to instill confidence in his partnership in the back line, but also was instrumental in helping direct the team or keep them in line during the game. I don't know. It is a pretty big vacuum, like a big hole to fill. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about Miles Robinson coming off arguably the best season for a center back last year in MLS, even though he didn't win the award. And then coming into this year, start, stop, injured, not injured, finally coming into full health. But I don't really know that I've seen that from him on the field yet.
Yeah. I mean, listen, Miles Robinson is a very good player, very good defender. He's only going to get better. But I think I'm one of those guys that's always, I'm not a pump that I was like a pump that breaks on Miles Robinson guy like last season. Now I'm like, okay, now elevate your game, elevate the game, elevate your distribution, be even more consistent. Don't just be the lockdown 1v1 defender, because in modern football, that's center back has to be much more than that. And I think he's going to get there. I think he's proven to be one of the top defenders in the league. But yeah, he's young. He's not Michael Parkhurst as far as experience goes. Michael Parkhurst, I agree. I think his retirement did set the team back a little bit as far as leadership and just like game presence. He was a very cerebral defender. So like in a very high octane kind of wild way of playing that Atlanta sometimes thrives under. It was good to have a guy like Michael Parkhurst that could settle everybody down, that could read the game, that could correct people's mistakes. And in that interview with Frank DeBoer, he brought up Michael Parkhurst in the same sentence as Darlington Nagbe and Julian Gressel. So clearly Parkhurst's retirement, which I understand it. This is my own personal opinion. I mean, I think that he could still play. I just believe that he could still play. Start every game? No. But the fact that Miles was coming up, that they knew that they were going to replace LGP with a similar type of player. You know, Michael Parkhurst wasn't going to get a lot of time, but I don't know why I felt like the retirement was kind of just like abrupt. And I think he could still play a role on a team that, considering the roster turnover that the front office was clearly getting ready for, I feel like a player like Michael Parkhurst could have hung around and helped in this transition.
Do we bring him back? We need you.
Can you hey, Michael, can you dress? No, I mean, it's too late. But again, that it's part of the history though. I think his retirement and when it happened will be part of this club's history because it hasn't worked out. It was supposed to be kind of like sending him off on a high, if you will. And we're replacing him. We have Miles Robinson. We have all these other players, and they're clearly struggling with that leadership part. And honestly, I think Michael Parkhurst was so underrated as a ball-playing center back. I mean, he was just that good. And so that's tough to replace as well.
Yeah, I mean, he had the tactical acumen. I think that was the biggest thing, especially in his. I say it's like he's a dog at the vet. Like in his advanced age, like his tactical acumen definitely helped cover up some of those deficiencies, at least from an athletic standpoint. But you're right. I mean, I was always pleasantly surprised, especially even whenever we deployed him at right back, like in emergency situations. I felt like his ability to play a ball would always strike me as like surprising, but I don't remember him ever like putting a foot wrong or like putting bad passes into up to the attack in third.
He was a daring passer, which is so important for Atlanta United. You have to be a daring, risk-taking distributor of the ball, even from your center back position. If you just play it safe, I think that's where this team is right now. They're very safe. They don't take a lot of risks like they used to. And that's what we refer to as like that lingering effect of DeBoer, who DeBoer didn't want to take a lot of risk. At one point, he even told us he didn't want Miles Robinson sending diagonal balls. And it was like DeBoer's bread and butter as a player was that ball. And he even told us, like, even though I did that as a player, I don't want my center backs to do that. He wants them to find the number 6, find the 8, and let them play. But that was a big shift from the way that those center backs were playing under Tata Martino. And just to stick with Michael Parkhurst, I thought he was one of the best passers in the game. And if you could move him around to left back, center back, right back, and he was still looking to break lines. He wasn't just looking to kind of like give it up and then get back in position. So, and we
saw that out of both him and LGP, right?
Yeah, like LGP as well. I mean, LGP did that last night in the game against Nashville. I was watching it, and same old LGP. He's like pinging balls across the field. He's taking risks when he has to. He was the player when they were down 1-0 with 10, 15 minutes to go. He was one of those players that was like, all right, I'm taking the ball and I'm going to make something happen. When it was 0-0, he was the guy yelling at his players on corner kicks and tackling guys and getting stuck in. LGP was the guy pregame in the huddle, yelling at everyone, getting them motivated. So I know Fernando Mesa is like supposed to be that player, and I think Fernando Mesa is a very good defender, and he will grow eventually into that type of player. But you just don't replace that attitude. You don't replace that energy that LGP brought, and to your point, Kevin, the way that he was able to play out of the back.
No, it's a good point. Like, I think one of the things that, at least personally, that I really enjoyed about the defensive playmaking under FDB was they seemed much more confident in possession and distribution, at least amongst themselves on the back line. But it's just now sort of coming to my realization that as good as Miles Robinson and Fernando Meza have been, neither one of those players are really moving up past midfield the way that we saw LGP and Michael Parkhurst doing on a consistent basis over years past, So much so that Michael Parkhurst ends up leading to the assist in MLS Cup. It's something that I can't imagine Miles Robinson. Yeah, exactly. I can't imagine Miles Robinson or Fernando Meza in that position the way that back line is currently structured. And I think that there's got to be some discussion about how you get some of that back without giving up some of the tactical consistency on the back line that we've seen. And I think that was really what was frustrating to me out of that Orlando match. Was it seemed like our defensive playmaking, regardless, so much so this season has been who's going to be scoring the goals, right? Like what's happening on offense. And I think that those questions still remain. But one of the things that was at least relatively consistent was our play defensively, with a few hiccups here or there. And this past weekend against Orlando, that just seemed completely thrown out altogether.
Yeah, it wasn't a good performance at all from anyone. They had a good second half, and what I asked Stephen Glass this afternoon, it's like, I remember Brad Guzan getting really upset after that Columbus match in Orlando because he was asked about a good second half. And he's like, we're not that type of team. We cannot live off of one good half. It's not good enough, da-da-da. And there seemed to be this like focus from some of the players, even like Brooks Lennon brought it up, and even Stephen Glass post game after Orlando, that like it got a lot better in the second half. But is that Atlanta United now? Right. Where it's like we have one good half and that's what we build off of. It's not good enough. The expectations remain. Just because of the brand, but clearly there's a lot of work to do. And all those things that we just discussed tactically, and the way the players were just kind of playing freely in the last few years. And, they had really good performances at times under Frank de Boer, but I think there was always that tug of war between the players and the manager. And now the team is like stuck in limbo and wanting to improve, but the direction right now is it's either temporary, and there's no plan yet that we know of. I know that the club is talking to managers. I don't know when that decision is going to come about. Like, I think we just look at the present state of the world. Would you bring in a manager right now? Like, it would not. I don't think it helps. And we don't know what 2021 is going to look like for anything regarding sports or MLS. So,
or the lineup, right? Like, I'd rather a manager come in and actually know what the lineup is going to be rather than come in for 8 or 9 games this season and it ultimately be a wash and start to instill something that's not even viable next season.
Yeah.
Not to mention the return of Joseph Martinez,
Yeah. Yes.
Like, so we've got that, it's going to be a good thing when we bring in a new manager, but it's also going to be another change, another, at least it will be further removed from FDB, but then you've still got to deal with this other change. I think
God help him if he loses more than 2 games in a row with this fan base the way it is.
Well, I want to move to more positive because I feel like we've just been circling the shame drain right now. At least our wings are pretty good and pretty exciting. George Bello. Well, George Bello has been great. I absolutely admit. Yeah. But I feel like Brooks Lennon has been the most consistent player that we've had throughout this season so far.
Yeah.
And it looks like he's the one who's going to try and score the goals. Like he had like 3 shots this weekend.
They're like all headers too.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
Oh no. Well, I feel like Bello on the left, he's been playing really good. I've been really impressed with his play, just bombing up the wing and then being able to track back. In fact, even on Saturday, he was able to track back some, but then when all of the center defensive midfield and center backs are not going to help you out, there's little that you can do there. And then on the right wing, we're going to have Escobar back. He played great against Nashville. Brooks Lennon has obviously been playing great. And I feel like there's at least some bright spots there that we can look to build on. And Stephen Glass can look to build on.
I think there have been bright spots. We don't have to, to your point, the shame train, not to jump back on it, but I will start with the fact that the previous manager, which I thought, I remember when he told me, when Frank told me on that call that I had with him last week. He was like, we didn't have any wingers.
Right.
We had no wingers. And he brought up Jake Mulroney. He's like, maybe Jake Mulroney can become that. So I thought that was interesting to hear from a manager who wanted to implement a system, a 3-4-3 system that is heavily dependent on wingers, that can track back. And it's just a very disciplined, and it's both fluid and very disciplined system. And clearly it's difficult. It's a very difficult system to master. But yeah, I think the bright spots from Orlando, even from Nashville, I thought there were some things that PT and George Bello did very well. Like, clearly that communication is something that has been working. Like, anytime PT would kind of drop centrally and receive the ball, it was almost automatic that George Bello was gone, and he would be free and they would find him. So that was positive, and that happened quite a few times against Nashville until Nashville figured it out and kind of adjusted. Now, Orlando clearly did their homework, and they just nullified that part of PT's game. But George Bello, I thought, was pretty consistent. He still got up and down the wing. His service was pretty good. He should have had an assist. I mean, he sent a ball into Adam John that he was just too late for it, but a great move. Now, what I feel about the wingers, I don't necessarily agree with Frank DeBoer. I do think that wing play is like, it could still be better. Brooks Lennon, to his credit, has worked his ass off. Like, he
absolutely
worker. He's extremely hungry. Against Orlando, to your point, like, he could have scored a couple goals, and he finally got his first goal from that service from Jurgen Damm. But it's not a dynamic. They're not dynamic wingers. To me, they're kind of like system dependent.
Pretty straight ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like they're going to bomb forward. The formation pushes those wingers up high, and so they're going to be in position to make plays, and then they have to make them. Can Brooks Lennon in a tight space beat his guy and make plays? That's not why he was brought in here. You could argue, well, Julian Gressel didn't do that either, but Julian Gressel just felt like he had a better understanding of the way the team was playing, and he could get himself in certain spots. But I still think that is a work in progress. It's one of the bright spots, though, to your point. I think they're consistently upfield, and they're getting in good positions to create chances. But are they 1v1 wingers? No. I mean, they're like, George Bello can become that, but you said it yourself, he does have a responsibility of getting back and tracking back. So I think that's still something to look at. When you talk about being intense and being on the front foot, you need those types of players like a Jake Mulroney to be consistently going at his guy. And I still see they're a little tentative sometimes. So that's something to look forward to. I think that's an easy fix. You're just telling them, you're 1v1, beat your man. Just do it. Like, we will support you. So.
Well, it's also going to benefit whenever they've got Joseph back as well. I mean, so much of Gressel's success was dependent on the fact that he had Joseph to distribute to, and that compounded by the success that these wings are already starting to find without him is only going to get more so whenever he comes back. So
yeah, and Joseph, like, again, teams are game plan for Joseph. The center backs don't sleep the night before the game because they're like, who's going to track Joseph? Don't forget about Joseph. Don't let Joseph get by you. So that shifts defenses around. And then a guy like Julian Gressel suddenly has tons of space, looks up, and he can provide service. Right now, there's still an opponent is not game planning for Adam John. And that's not a slight to Adam John. They just know that he's a post-up kind of, target striker.
Yeah, he's a warm body.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to prepare for that. You can keep your shape. You don't have to take many risks. And so then all the focus is on those wings. And they're just serving balls into 2-3 center backs. They're just waiting for that cross. So that's another thing that I'm still seeing from Atlanta United. Like, the attack is a little bit better, but it's still a lot of kind of hopeful balls into the box.
Yeah.
I think one of the more surprising things, to the Brooks Lennon point about his play so far in the second restart, is that how many shots on goal he's had from headers. He's not a big guy.
No.
Like, right. I feel like he's had at least, so he should have had two header goals on Saturday. The one that just, Octopus kept it out by probably an inch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was very, if that goes in too, how different is that game?
Match,
yeah, it's a completely different match. But he, I think it's a little disheartening, but also heartening the fact that he's on the end of so many headers. It means that we're getting good service into the box. But at the same time, if you have a 6'4" guy in there, that's not the guy that's getting on the end of that.
Yeah.
I mean, him and Miles Robinson or Anton.
I was gonna say, but didn't we have Kenwin Jones in the lineup a couple of years ago?
That's true. Yeah.
Against, I rewatched the Nashville game, and this was before the Orlando loss, but I was watching it, and I'm like, okay, there are a couple times when Atlanta United broke through, and they're in the opponent's half, and it's probably on Bell. It's like Bello and PT kind of combining. And I looked at the runners, and there were 5 Atlanta players in the box in the first half, looking for that final ball. The final ball wasn't always there, but the intention of getting forward, I thought they did that well against Nashville. Against Orlando, not so much. And it wasn't just because Atlanta did play well. I mean, Orlando just stifled the midfield. It was just that was their game plan. They rested, Mauricio Pereira, their DP number 10. They rested Nani, and and Oscar Pereira just okay, we're going to be compact. I have 2 essentially number 6s that are just going to shadow the hell out of Eric Remedi and Mo Adams. And eventually Atlanta United just got super predictable. And we go back to the back line. I tweeted this after the game, Miles Robinson had 89 touches in that game. The defenders were the players that had the most touches for Atlanta United. There are 2 central midfielders. I think Mo Adams had 21 touches, Eric Remedi 46. So that is, if I am an Atlanta United fan, I think the concern is that opponents know how to beat Atlanta United. It's you can look at those numbers and say, okay, the coach clearly saw if we nullify their 2 central midfielders, they're going to have to attack down the wings, and then we take our chances. So that is a concern because Atlanta United looks a little bit too easy to game plan against. Stephen Glass brought it up after the match. We were too easy to play through in that first half. So still, again, this is the point of this episode tonight is there's just so much work to be done, and it's who is really accountable for it. But every game is kind of like a toss-up. How are they going to play? Stephen Glass said, which I thought was true. He's a benefit that we have is that we're a new staff. Some of our lineups are going to be a surprise for the opponent, which I think is an excellent point. But after one game, I think an opponent can see, okay, we know how these guys want to play because we don't have to worry about Joseph. They're still figuring out who's going to score their goals. And PT Martinez clearly is a danger player. So if you can just body him a little bit and force other players to make plays, you might have a good chance. But we go back to Brooks Lennon. Yeah, a big bright spot against Orlando, a hustle type of player. Is he the guy though? He's supposed to come in and replace the all-time assist leader at Atlanta United. This is not the best year to do that, but I think still, just like everyone else, the jury is kind of still out on that signing.
Yeah, somebody's asking in the traps, what happens? What does the lineup look like when everybody gets healthy? Dan, is Jürgen Damm? Is he the guy to replace? I guess to replace Julian Gressel on that right wing.
Well, I would put Damm. He would be my right winger. If he's going to be a consistent starter, that's where I'd want to play him. So I'd be playing him higher up the field than Gressel. Mm-hmm. I feel like.
Yeah.
I don't think we can really. We're never replacing like for like players. I feel like you can kind of loosely draw a circle around him, but I want Damm higher up the field. I don't want him as much defensive responsibility because I'd want, other players to be taking it on deeper in the field.
Especially whenever you've got Escobar behind him, you don't need it as much. So,
but I want to save his speed for running at defenders.
Yeah, I totally agree. I thought even when Frank de Boer, before the Orlando tournament, before COVID, when I had no inkling that Frank de Boer would be let go, I thought I was starting to figure out what both Frank and the front office wanted from the team. And something that I had landed on was just overall team speed. I thought I think that's something that they want to increase. I think across every position, ideally Atlanta would love to have faster players, because this, both in CONCACAF Champions League and MLS, it can be, some games can be track meets. That's not every game in MLS, though. I think there are teams that you can see that want to be methodical, want to build play, want to possess. But I felt like the profile of the player was, how do we just increase our team speed? It just wasn't. I don't think they're there yet, clearly. But you're starting to see some players, like I think Jürgen Damm is like the type of guy. I agree. I would play him higher up the pitch, and his only job is to go 1v1 and provide service.
Right.
You don't want him as a wing back. That was what Justin Meram struggled with so often, that he is a 1v1 player, and Frank had him as a wing back, where 50% of your responsibility is defending. And so I think there are some pieces there that you can allow creative players to just play freely and create. And I think that's the goal for Atlanta United. I think it's just right now, these players are coming in, they're not fit, like Kubo and Jürgen Damm are just coming in. I think Stephen Glass has been very blunt about the fact that they're not match fit yet. But if they're going to have to be, really soon, I think they need that type of spark. They need that type of player that even a right back or left back is like, okay, I need to be careful. I need to watch this guy, because he's going to go at me 1v1. And right now there just aren't enough players on the field doing that.
So fitness, we've been talking about fitness, I feel like, ever since Pity arrived.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the reason why players have come in not fit? Is it a mentality that they're not ready for, or just not as interested in as, you have players like Miguel Almeron, who their whole life is just prepping to play soccer, it seems like. Do you think it's just a different mentality that these other guys bring, or is it just a different way they approach the game?
Let's start with Miguel Almeron, because he was a different species of player. He was always working hard. He would try to fight through injuries. I've told this story before, when I showed up at the training ground in 2018, pouring rain, cold. I think it was November or October, just like a shitty day in Atlanta. And we waited in this lobby area, and we look outside, and there's no one on the field except Miguel Almeron and a trainer. And he was working through, I think, a hamstring injury or something, but he was working his ass off in the rain, in the cold rain, just working, trying to get fit. And I remember thinking back then, I was like, wow, that's the type of player that any teammate would need. You see a guy, your player doing that. And I think that trickled down to that team. That's why they were so together and so united. There's so many instances of COVID messed up a lot of fitness. Let's just be honest. I go back to Chicharito Hernandez at Orlando. He was not fit, dude. He didn't even pass the eye test. He did not look like a professional first-rate soccer player. He looked like he had not played for a while. He kind of showed up and was forced to play because he was one of the star players. He got injured immediately after that. In Atlanta United's case, I don't think it's because of lack of interest. There are the games where even in poor performances, the effort was always there. They were always at least trying to play. They just looked lost and disjointed. So, the players that have come from Mexico just have not been playing, and I think that's still they're not like Kubo Torres and Jürgen Damm, as popular as they are in Mexico, and they did have their moments. These are two players that were on the outside looking in at their previous clubs. So now they're coming in and they're having to get match fit. They're having to match the fitness of the players that are already here, and they're having to match the rhythm and the pace of play in MLS. And it's just not going to happen immediately. And so I think we're going to see them. I think they're going to accelerate their fitness though and get them in, because now it's a bit of a crisis as far as just results go. But I don't think it's because of lack of interest. I think sometimes it is confidence. The guys are down. Even professional players, they looked down against Orlando, man. They didn't look like a good team mentally. And I think that Eric Rometti told us today, the first goal just hit him really hard.
Yeah.
And I think that's an issue with Atlanta United. That they've carried over from the pre-COVID and then all the way through Orlando, it was like heads down, frustration, and it just would like everything would just like flip on its head. They're not a team that when they get scored on, they're like, all right, we still got this. And that's what Stephen Glass said today, because at the same time, they still have to believe that what this staff is telling them to do is the right thing to do. And they're having to deal with that when they're like losing a game or something. So it's just a tough ask all around.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that ties into a little bit of what's been going on in the trap. Ronald Pena mentions those players came into a club with a vision under a manager they would die for. Now Atlanta has no identity. And that also is maybe one of the frustrations that I've had. And to call Jay Riddle out himself and some of the other people that I had seen on Twitter is that, like, I think one of the things that really scares me right now with the fan base and this front office and this organization is that after the firing of Frank DeBoer, it seems like everything's on the table, and you hear people calling for Carlos Bocanegra's head now and Bocanegra out. And it's like, if you don't sort of stop the bleeding and try to build some consistency in this organization, you're not going to fix the problems of a lack of identity, and just throwing the baby out with the bathwater and slash and burn from top to bottom isn't going to fix any of that. And it's just really, really frustrating and disheartening to see as a fan of this team and the parts and pieces of it that are on there that I genuinely believe are capable of being successful. I don't think that, getting rid of Bocanegra and then Darren Eales, and then people are going to be calling for Arthur Blank to sell before you know it. Like it's just, come on, man. Like I think we can all agree that it's strange times, like pandemic or not, but for this organization with the turnover on the staff as far as players go, but also the front office with management structure and tactics and everything else thrown into the mix, like people have got to calm down a little bit, because it's.
Let me ask you something. First of all, I mean, there's pressure on Darren Eales and Carlos Bocanegra. There was pressure on them when they were winning. So
right.
The fact that things have not gone well and that some of the decisions that they've made are now clearly mistakes or just bad fits, perhaps in different circles or depending on who you talk to, that pressure has increased. But they're not going anywhere. I mean, Carlos Bocanegra and Darren Eales are not going anywhere. I think they've built enough equity to not get a mulligan, because I've been on different pods where I agree with the fact that Atlanta United doesn't get mulligans. They don't just get to take a year off and ask the fans to forget about what happened in 2020. Now we're going to be back. Like, they have to face this criticism and deal with it and make the right decisions. But I will ask you guys, like, the fact that the fan base is kind of up in arms, and perhaps, the veil has been kind of raised over their eyes and they kind of see some of the truth behind decisions and all that, whose fault is that? Like, the front office themselves have come out from the very beginning and raised the stakes very high for this club, no matter what. They have to compete for titles. They have to compete for trophies. They have to be in the top echelon of anything that they participate in at all times. Now, I know that that's a lot of just kind of like PR speak, but it gets to the point where you've got to either live or die by those words. And I think right now you're seeing the fact that the front office has raised the expectations so high that now the fans are like, okay, well, now what? Like, I thought we were supposed to be good. You made these decisions. You got rid of all these players. Where are we going from here? So my question to you guys, and I would love to hear it, is just like, whose fault is that? If the fans are that upset, whose fault is it?
I think Tim go first. Tim go first. You've been quiet. You've been quiet for too long. We'll work around clockwise. Tim, Dan, and then I'll pick up the rear.
I'm trying not to get exposed. Yeah. I think it's a combination of things, to be honest. I think in hindsight, is definitely a mistake by the front office to overhaul what Tata Martino had built. Not just he got the results, obviously winning MLS Cup and then, walking out on top. But you have that, again, going back to what we're talking about, the FDB muscle memory of the players. You had players that were going into a system that the front office had to fully buy into. And Felipe, you talked about this at the beginning, was like bringing Frank de Boer in. You wanted to bring in the Ajax pipeline. You wanted to bring in the mentality of building from the youth and building this total football team, even though I don't know if we've seen it work in a team or in a league as financially restrictive as MLS is. And yeah, and then there's so much. To me, it's the front office, because you have to. They're smart enough and savvy enough, I think, to know that if you're going for not just a change, like going from Tata Martino to, GBS would have still been a pretty big change, right? Because GBS is, at least whenever he was coming in, being touted, more of a defensive manager, less open and creative than Tata Martino. But then you go even further than that, and you bring in Frank de Boer, and you have to go all in, right? I mean, if you're changing managers and all that, you have to go and say, this is our guy. We're going to buy into what he thinks because we believe in him. And because of that, we're going to have to change the way that we go about, but not just like our tactical focus, but going in and changing the way that we go about scouting players. Everything. Who knows, like, if that's, to me, that's part of the problem too. We see, I think Brian, our buddy in the trap, was saying, you replaced, let me see if I can find the exact comment real quick, just talking about the replacements of who was let go. And there's too much in here. But replacing LGP and Nagby with, let's say, Heinemann and Anton Walks. I mean, those are not good comparisons.
LGP and Julian Gressel wanted to stay. They would have stayed to play for Frank de Boer. It's not like they were like, it's either me or Frank. No, like, they wanted to stay. Like, yeah, they wanted new deals and perhaps they wanted more money, and like, that's fine. Like, in any job, high performers expect to be rewarded, but they wanted to stay here and they were willing to still work with Frank de Boer. So again, I think it goes back to those front office decisions and why they made them, and when they made them, they really banked them. They really supported the manager, I think, and thinking behind Frank de Boer and why he was hired and what he could potentially become. It just didn't work out. Like, there was a point when I felt like Frank de Boer could eclipse anything that Tata Martino did results-wise in Atlanta. There was a moment where he could have done that. Would he be as engaged with the fan base? I don't know, maybe not. But winning cures anything. He was that close. It just didn't work out, and I think clearly now we know why. But I bring that up when people kind of want to debate about the players that left and that they wanted to leave. No, there was a moment where they wanted to stay here. They wanted to play for Frank de Boer this season in 2020. And it just wasn't part of the plan.
Yeah, before I switch it over to, I'm so bad with the mirror, to Dan. Before I switch it over to Dan, just to close it out, I think in some ways, I think that the front office is taking ownership of this mistake by cutting bait now. I don't think they cut bait with Frank de Boer, and that's why they call it, I think, part of the reason why it's a mutual decision, what have you, I think there is some blame that they're accepting there, and I think they're ready to move on from it, because if they would have stuck with Frank de Boer, things kept potentially getting more toxic. It's all in the past now, but they could have been tied to that. They could have, they're making an executive decision now that they need to move on. They need to get back to what they know, because obviously what Frank de Boer, they brought him in to do, and what they tied themselves to, they didn't know well enough. And I think it ultimately ended with them. Yeah,
I think that it's frustrating from a fan's perspective, because you don't know all the options that they had when they had to make the decisions. So I have to put my faith in the front office and say, when they decided to hire Frank de Boer, that was the best decision out of all the options that they had. We don't know the landscape. And when Frank came in, I was really happy. I was like, this could be amazing. Like, I love the Ajax building the pipeline of the academy. He's a real tenured coach. I think he had some value to him because of those past misses on his clubs, but there were extenuating circumstances for both Crystal Palace and Inter. So I was excited. I was really excited. And I feel like if things had carried on from where they were in 2018, I think he'd still be here. Because he lost the locker room, that's why he's gone in my book. And I think absolutely the front office have sort of made their bed and said, we've set this high bar for us. This is where we want to be. And this is what fans can expect of us. But I feel that from my perspective, a lot of people are going to say that. And I feel like you've got to read between the lines a little bit and see under the hype and the marketing and understand that, they're not superhuman. And in every decision they make, in fact, every decision they make is a gamble. Like they can put together as best as they can. But when you add in everything that we've had in this godforsaken year, you just cannot 100% predict this. Now, they built up a lot of capital with the fans winning the MLS Cup, I think we had a great season in 2019. And now some of that capital is being spent and burned. Yeah. So I think they will answer to it. We're only going to know in like a year's time when we've had the potential to play a full season and really see some of these investments mature, because we haven't been able to see any of these new guys really do anything that we can really build a foundation on.
No, and I'll say quickly before get into Kevin is that we don't know every single manager that they interviewed.
Right.
Some big time European names have been kind of tossed to me that were part of the interview process. No one to not like a Zidane or anything like that, but like some, previously popular European managers were part of that. Now, GBS, Guillermo Barros Escaloto, the LA Galaxy coach, was interviewed, as was Gabriel Milito, who gave Ezequiel Barco his debut at Independiente. Now, I think, was Frank de Boer the better option? I mean, I guess now you could say no. And right. You look at the Galaxy and say, who knows what GBS would have done in Atlanta? I wrote about the options, and my critique of GBS wasn't necessarily that he was really defensive. It was more like he just wasn't very inventive, because at Boca Juniors is a massive club, and the team that he had was stacked. I mean, they were just good everywhere, but they had to face Pity Martinez and Marcelo Gallardo's River Plate, and they never got over that hump. And there were times where he did play a little safe in those big matches, but I think his fault, and I think we still see it in LA a little bit, is that he's just not this uber tactician, and that was, that's tough to follow after Tata Martino, who was a tactician, was a very strategic manager. Even though you kind of knew what you were going to get, he was very studious, very tedious, very stubborn in his ways, and it came from a very philosophical place. But I still think GBS and Milito would probably have been better options than Frank de Boer, because of the background that they're coming from. They would have understood how to get, perhaps, how to maximize these South American players, just how to understand them mentally.
Sure.
And I think that's where the big miss was. And when they decided on Frank de Boer and not on those other candidates, they essentially felt that connection culturally was not as important as perhaps a long-term vision of evolution, academy pipeline, etc.
Well, and I think also it's important, sorry, Kevin, last one, to have that sort of father figure or that sort of relationship with a coach, especially with younger players, because I feel like that's what Tata brought in. I feel like when Jose Mourinho was starting out in Porto, he had that with his players and was immensely successful because of that. And you see, Sir Alex Ferguson, same kind of deal. Right. Even Jurgen Klopp is that type of man manager. Let's talk about our feelings, right? And I think that's hugely underrated in the game.
Especially today. I think with the way players are today, I mean, you just need to have that balance. It can't just be you're a strictly man manager and you don't get results, or you're strictly a disciplinarian and you're a tactician. I think there just has to be a balance.
Yeah. I feel like us guys are a lot more emotional than we like to project. And I feel like that needs to be taken care of in the locker room by a manager. Anyway, sorry, Kev.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I mean, I think I've got a lot of different notes and I'm not really sure how to parse them out. But I guess I'll start with what kind of started this whole discussion. I guess to start with what started off this whole conversation, which was Ron's point about players coming in to play for a manager and sort of what those first few seasons sparked for Atlanta United. That situation and that condition is never going to exist for Atlanta United because there's not going to be players coming into a system with the manager being there. That happens at the beginning, and then it happens when players are rotated out through the roster over a manager tenure. And I think that's what started to happen with FDB over the past 2 years. So, we're not going to have the luxury of all these players just necessarily coming in hot off the press out the gate because the club is already in existence. So you're already kind of fighting an uphill battle as a new manager to begin with and having to win over the players. And I think that there's a certain amount of respect that we have to give FDB for trying to take on that initiative, knowing the cultural differences that were going to be there in that case regardless. And ultimately what I think led to his dismissal was those cultural differences, because statistically speaking and talking wins and losses, I think that, Felipe, you had a great point. Like, he was really close to being better than Tata was. And for
way better. Yeah.
Had a fucking incredible season last year. And then you throw into the mix this year and the circumstances that plagued all of the league, not just Atlanta United. And you talk about, Galaxy and what Galaxy are doing. Let's look across the league right now at major clubs that have major investments like LA Galaxy, who has 1 point less than Atlanta United, is behind the playoff line. LAFC is just holding on in 7th place in the West. Eastern Conference, DC United is all the way down next to the bottom. I mean, Atlanta United, NYC, both below playoff line. Like, this is not just a situation that is independent of Atlanta United and the managerial woes that it's had over the beginning of this season and the results that followed. Like, tides ebb and flow. And when talking about the front office and who's accountable and what you expect out of the front office, I expect a front office that's going to value their manager and back them up to go after players, spend money, and be ambitious in those signings, which I think all of us can agree, aside from letting go of a couple of those players like Julian Gressel and LGP, which we don't really know the specifics or dollar amounts as to what led to that. We are a salary cap league, and we have to adhere to things that other leagues around the world don't have to. And that comes with really tough decisions. But ultimately, the front office has to back their manager, which I think that they did with Frank de Boer. I mean, you go out, you're spending money, you're consistently setting the bar for DP signings and how much you're willing to pay players, and trying to still maintain a South American player base and roster and lineup, and trying to get younger players like Miles Robinson into a lineup, which we know FDB plays to FDB's strengths and his tenure at Ajax. Like, you have a front office backing him. You don't see the results. So what I expect a front office to do is to take their losses and pivot and adjust for that, which they also did in firing him and letting him go. Like, I don't see where this front office has taken missteps in being ambitious with the player signings and roster moves that they've made, and having to get a new manager. Tata was gone no matter what, guys. Like, stop holding on to this like there was some hope that we were going to keep him if we threw enough money at him. Like, he was gone regardless, and there was going to be a new manager in place. And if you look at the managerial prospects that were on the table, look at LA Galaxy. They're not doing a whole lot better than we are right now anyway. It's all of these things that I think the front office can't just be thrown out because we lost one game after we just got rid of our manager 2 games ago, and we still have all of these, to Dan, to your point, we have these investments on the team. We have players that, to your point, and I can't wait to hear Felipe back me up, that I don't think Barco is going to be sold for $30 million. However, I still think he's going to be an investment for the team.
I mean, speaking of risk, Ezequiel Barco is a huge risk for the club to even bring him. I mean, that was a big risk that they took, and that you can argue whether or not it's really worked out. He is going to get sold. $30 million, I doubt it, because Miguel Almeron.
Oh Lord!
I think timeline needs to be taken into account.
It does. But if you look at Miguel Almeron, was like a $27 million transfer. They wanted $30 million for him. In hindsight, you could probably side with Darren Eales for having argued that $30 million was important for Miguel Almeron. Not so much for Ezequiel Barco, but just like totally different optics. Now,
yeah, absolutely.
Here's what I'll say about some of the things that Kevin said, because I agree with a lot of it, but like Tata Martino, yeah, I'm not 100% convinced that he wouldn't have stayed. Now, I remember at a scrum where he was still in charge, and I think he had already perhaps announced, yes, he had already announced that he was leaving at the end of the season. He was going to take the Mexico job. Like, after all that speculation, he had finally come out and said, yes, this is happening. The next time we were at training and we got a hold of Tata, like all the reporters were there, he answered a question about like who should be the coach. Like, have you thought about that? Who should succeed you? And he, kind of chuckled and gave kind of like a funny answer. But then he did say, seriously, I did give my recommendation. I seriously doubt that he recommended Frank de Boer. That's a really good point. Yeah. Okay. I mean, and this is a manager in Tata that knew what he had in those players. And I think when I met with him in Dallas, when I met with Tata Martino in Dallas in February, and I asked him at the end of our interview, just like, hey, what's your opinion of like what's happened to Atlanta United since you left? I could tell it was like a guy that saw like someone had spray painted his masterpiece a little bit, and what he told me, it's in the story that I wrote that you guys can find, the interview that I did about just like how he wants to build, El Tri and the Mexican national team. But it's essentially like, they had the pieces for not only Atlanta United to be really good domestically, but the pieces were there for Atlanta United to be good internationally, to compete in that CONCACAF Champions League, but like legitimately compete. But in order to do that, you needed those guys that we've talked about on today's show. You needed LGP, you needed Darlington Nagbe, you needed Gressel, you needed Joseph, you needed perhaps even Parkhurst. Like, you needed that
before Miggy's, and then potentially Miggy before Miggy had to too, right? I mean, his departure was prior to that transfer as well.
Correct. I mean, Miggy was going even like
absolutely,
even before Tata. But like, my point is that there was a moment where I feel like this story could have continued, and not exactly the way it was under Tata, but clearly Tata saw, okay, if I were the front office decision maker on the next coach, I would bring in this guy. To this day, I wish I would have asked him who he had recommended, but clearly it was probably someone from that South American tree, that like Bielsa, Tata type of relationship, that coaching tree that understood the players and that could kind of take them into, the next phase of this club's history. But again, we can dwell on it, but I do think that going back to what this conversation sparked is that in the end, the front office deserves a lot of credit for what this brand is, what this team is, what this club is. But just like they deserve credit and the capital that they've earned, they deserve to be criticized, and that's
absolutely
part of the job. It's not toxic. It's no one like. I'm not going to write hit pieces against Darren Neal.
No, not at all.
It's just like that's the nature of the job.
And again, it's a matter of what do players or employees, for that matter, do with that criticism, and it's how they respond to it. And I think that this front office being criticized by Frank de Boer being appointed as manager and what was happening with the locker room was a mutual agreement of his departure. And I think that under criticism, it's responding to that and taking action. And had the front office continued with Frank de Boer and had multiple more, more player walk-offs and a dissension from the locker room, I think it'd be a completely different story. But from my perspective, the front office has done everything they can under that criticism, and rightfully so, to try to right the ship. And I hope that they continue to do so, because without the front office backing whoever the next manager is, manager's only as good as the players he has playing for him. And it's going to take a front office that's willing to invest in whoever that is and whatever they want to do with the team, and making sure it aligns with those ideals of Atlanta United setting the bar for the league.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
Well said, Kevin.
I had one more. I told you
go.
so, which was that I wasn't on the show last week. But who did I say? Does anybody remember who I said was going to be the difference maker in the Orlando game?
Chris
Does anybody remember who scoffed it off? I believe it was Dan James, who was like, "Oh, Mueller's not going to do anything. He's really, he's not to be worried about." Lee has an assist and a goal in that game. You're welcome, Dan. Shut your mouth.
Both from terrible mental errors.
I will say that link up play between DK, and
that was a nice
Michelle.
goal.
That was a very nice goal. That's the chemistry that I feel like we should be striving for.
Yeah.
The way that those players just kind of seamlessly connected on all three of those passes and the movement off the ball. I mean,
excellent point. And you know what? When I was watching Orlando in the MLS's back term, I was like, wow, this guy, and again, I've done deep dives in my head on Oscar Pereira. I've watched him play in Colombia when I was a teenager for the teams in Cali. My family's from Cali. He was a big time player for Deportivo Cali, not my squad. I'm a América de Cali fan. So everyone watching the show, like Danny and Parcero, I know that those guys are big Cali fans. Oscar Pereira has a history of playing a certain way as a player, and clearly as a coach, he wants to play this way as well. Like combination play in the front, in the final third, kind of like freedom in a very just like Latin American, South American style, that when I'm watching this game on Saturday, I'm like, that's who Atlanta want, not like who they want to be, but that's how they want to play.
That's how the players want to be, certainly.
Yeah. They want to be the team that's like dinking and pinging guys and 1-2s around guys and showing off essentially. And I thought that was, again, if I were a diehard Atlanta United fan, what was most disheartening is that at times, at certain moments of that game, Orlando just like kind of punked Atlanta, and they just looked like the confident team. They looked like regardless if Atlanta scored on them or tied the match, like they knew exactly what they were doing. And even though they didn't have Pereira or Nani in, they still had those moments of like, whoa, that's good combination play. That looks nice. That looks fluid. You've got guys that aren't static, that they're moving around, they're attacking, they're pressing. So I think overall, and I've said this before, like Atlanta has their own issues and they're dealing with them. And I think the front office is confident that they can get out of whatever situation they've put themselves in. But in the meantime, teams around MLS, teams around Atlanta are getting better. I mean, that's what happens in this type of league where the parity remains where it is, that there's salary caps, that there isn't like a big time, overspender. If you like one bad year and a bunch of teams can catch up with you.
Yeah. And that's what makes the league fun, right? Like it sucks to be on the bottom half of that, but I mean, that's what makes MLS a fun league, is that it's not just who has the deepest pockets that wins all the game, that you see you see some level of consistency in teams over the years, but it's not the same teams winning championships year in and year out, unless you're Toronto and Seattle of late. But more or less, you see this rising and falling of teams regardless of what you expect out of them year in and year out.
Yeah, for sure. I did want to point out real quick Bill Holcomb's comment, and I don't know how many of you guys were listening to 92.9's broadcast as opposed to the Univision broadcast, but Bill Holcomb saying, I did appreciate Nani getting his lip busted and the ref didn't care at all. That was a good moment, one bright spot. I don't think I've heard And I think it was Jason Longshore just going ballistic about Nani still being able to be on the field for as long as he did with like wisdom tooth surgery, gauze in his mouth. Just it's like it's not getting out onto the field, so the ref's not paying attention to it. But I thought it's not very often I hear Jason get incensed about something, and it was pretty entertaining to listen to.
We got voicemails, right?
Yeah, we got one voicemail. Yeah, we got one voicemail from our buddy Joe Johnstone that I do want to play real quick.
Go ahead, Felipe, while he's pulling it up.
No, I remember like the penalty, the non-penalty on Brooks Lennon. When I saw the play, immediately I was like, "Whoa, high boot! That's going to be a PK." I kept watching the replay, and I don't remember who tweeted. Someone tweeted to me that I needed to delete my tweet. I don't delete tweets, guys, unless there's a terrible typo that I can't live with. Like, I'm not deleting my tweet. The play in hindsight, I understand why Brooks Lennon thought it was a PK. I understand why every Atlanta United fan thought it was a PK. But the more I watched it, it's like Antonio Carlos had already cleared the ball. And when he cleared, by the time he cleared the ball, Brooks Lennon had already turned his back. And yeah, I think there was an intent to kind of clear. And you know what keepers do? If you're a goalkeeper and you're watching this, come on, you know what goalkeepers do. They come out, they catch the ball, and they stick their knee out. They take a little piece of you, just to let you know, come in here again, and this is going to happen. I thought that's what that defender was doing. Antonio Carlos was like, I'm clearing this ball. If anyone is in front of me, think twice because here comes my boot. The ref determined that I think that's what he saw. He saw a player that had already cleared the ball, wasn't as reckless as it looked. Clearly, he almost chopped Brooks Lennon's head off. But I think that's that. When I saw the Twitter like alerts going crazy, the only thing I thought was that's not why Atlanta United lost the game. That's not what lost the game. Had it been a PK and they converted, yes, it would have been a totally different last 10, 15 minutes. But I thought it was hilarious that someone told me, like, Felipe, please delete that tweet. And I like read it. I'm like, I don't see any typos, so
yeah,
live with it.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing you could do to go change it.
Nah.
I think one counter to that is like, I mean, that was an incredibly high foot. And
the guy's like 8'7" though.
But the other thing is, like, if you're sliding in to take a ball and you clear the ball from sliding that, but then the standing player stays there and you happen to clatter into him, I mean, you'll get a yellow card for that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I thought it was gross. I thought it was a yellow card. But
yeah.
It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter
to that point. I mean, we didn't finish our chances either. Like that was part of it too. Is like we had. I mean, between
we're about finishing chances now. It's not just
How creative was about finishing?
Yeah, just to go back to the chemistry point too with Oscar Pereira's Orlando City team is like we can't expect to get that right now with an ever changing front three or front whatever you want to call it, attacking 4 or 5. It's just. Those guys, I don't feel like right now have enough time to play together in an actual match situation where they're in that chemistry on the field. And it's going to be, I don't know when we'll see that. Yeah. I don't know when that'll come in. I do want to play this real quick.
I mean, FDB didn't have that either.
Good evening.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry. It's been a minute since I've been in the trap and we're able to call in. And I've just been kind of down lately. And I was trying to figure out like if it was our form or if it was just the overall tactics. And I realized finally what it was. I miss Frank de Boer's sexiness. I just can't get over it. I wish he was here. I hope you guys have a great night. Bye.
My favorite part about that is Google Voice does transcriptions, and it took sexiness as vulgarity, so it's just S with a bunch of asterisks. Like we're to the point now, like on basic cable after 10 p.m. you could say fuck, but like Google still somehow is trying to censor sexiness. Like,
I mean, listen, Frank knew how to dress. He knew how to dress on the sideline. I remember, this is a funny story. He came on, he met with us at like a typical Tuesday afternoon scrum, and we were all waiting for him. And he usually would like literally run from the training ground or from the training pitch and just like show up for his, 15 minutes with us. And he was always early. Okay. Never late. I mean, just very, very European, very like that's exactly what they wanted in that club. The guy was like on time all the time. So one day, instead of showing up early, he was like actually slightly late, maybe like 1 or 2 minutes late. And instead of coming from the training ground, he was already like dressed, showered, ready to go. And I think they were going to leave for some road trip immediately after that. And he was wearing, I mean, they were kind of short shorts, like, kind of like skinny jorts style. Like, I mean,
they were European cut.
I would probably rock them. They're European cut. I like the European cut. I would wear those. But it was just kind of like shocking for some of the reporters, and like someone asked him about his shorts, and I just remember him being like, "What?" He was not fazed at all. He was like, "This is Like I think he even like made an Old Navy joke. Like, you can probably find these at Old Navy. So like a lot of the reporters and I like will DM and we'll talk about like Frank de Boer away from the post game press conferences where I honestly sometimes he would get in trouble, like with throw a player under the bus or criticize a player or whatever. Away from that kind of setting and just like the small talk before the microphones go on, a great guy, extremely gracious, kind of fun, like the type of guy that you could banter with, and he was down. He just didn't really have a filter when it came to like the official interview. But I'll never forget the jorts, the short, skinny shorts that he wore. I thought he wore them well. No socks, white sneakers.
It's good. A vibe.
It's a vibe.
Those shoes are probably only good for like two wears with the no socks on, right? Like that's
it's probably the no-shows, dude. Come on, give him some credit.
Or those like just go and grab a box of what they have at DSW sitting in the aisle that you could put on the little.
Yeah, it's basically the no-shows. They have cotton no-shows like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like the sole of your foot of the pantyhose. It's like they took pantyhose, cut off the foot, and
that's all you need.
Put it in the box. That's the PPE I need. Like that's
something to soak it up. Yeah. Something to soak it up.
Exactly. Okay, we got heavy week ahead. We have 2 games this week. We play. Obviously, we skipped the match in Miami last week, but the return fixture, which is end up being the first fixture of the home and home with them, is on Wednesday, at Mercedes-Benz Stadium at 7:00, and then on Saturday we go down to Exploria Stadium and play Orlando City. I mean, Dan, how are you feeling going into this? Just knowing the crapshoot that we've had in the past week, and the lineup questions and the roulette that we've essentially been playing with these lineups the past couple games. How do you feel going into Wednesday and then a short turnaround to go back down to play Orlando?
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to playing Orlando again. Though, to be fair, I don't think we had mental lapses that led to the goals, but we did have some bright spots. I mean, you play that game 5 times, maybe we win 2 of them. So I think right now, I mean, of course I'm Atlanta United biased, but we probably won't beat Orlando City in Orlando. And I'm not that confident against Miami, but I'm more confident against Miami than I am Orlando. So I'd take a win against Miami, and we'll probably lose against Orlando.
And what about you, Felipe? Are you allowed to prognosticate?
I think I can. I tend to like stay away from predictions, but I'll predict. I mean, I think if the more likely win is against Inter Miami at home, because I think it just the optics of that game though make it a toss up, because Inter Miami, they're coming off a loss as well. They need a win. I think they have unlike Atlanta United, they have a pretty decent and developing identity. They know how to play. I think they're pretty clean on the ball. They're pretty confident on the ball. they're not like super high pressing. They're more of like, if they'll catch guys in bad positions. Like I would look at someone like Brooks Lennon, George Bello, like the wingers that we've discussed that are going to be on the touchline in tight spaces. Those are the guys that Inter Miami loves to press and turn over and go. So like Atlanta did not do well under pressure against Orlando. They have to fix that. They have to be ready to play against a team that will pressure them, like do a midfield press. How do they play through that? But they're at home. It's even though there's not 70,000 people at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, I think Atlanta will be more ready for that match than they will be perhaps for Orlando when they have to travel and they're playing against a team that they've already faced and that beat them. And on Saturday, I think Nani will start, Pereira will start for Orlando. So it's going to be a different lineup. The game against Inter Miami, I think, is a 50-50 toss-up. I think either team can win that game.
I'm hoping we see Barco play a full 90. We saw him come in late against Orlando. I think if Barco's playing the full match against Miami, I'm more confident in a win. But even with him on the field, knowing a full healthy lineup out of Orlando and what just happened, along with travel, I think maybe best case 3 points, worst case 1 out of the 2 matches. Maybe a draw against Miami.
Barco, it's funny because like we're kind of convinced he's not a $30 million player, but
some of us are.
I wrote a story on him before COVID, and I was like, there's nothing that he has to prove in MLS. He's going to be a big time sale. The dollar amount is up in the air. Could be 20.
Agreed.
Could be 15. Like whatever it is. This guy's done enough. Like
whatever it is, it's not 30, is what you're saying.
It's 31.
I hope it's 29.
No, it's 30 million and €1 to the Arsene Wenger.
But
transfer.
Speaking of Barker, he did not play against Nashville, and Atlanta win the game. But there are still times where like you're watching and you're like, come on, like pace of play. It needs to be faster. Rossetto, very good on the ball, really good on the ball. Really, it looks really classy on the ball, but he's not a guy that turns you and goes. That's just not who he is. And you saw against Orlando, as soon as literally his first touch, Barco comes on, and his first touch is straight to Eric Remedi, and Eric Remedi just like, boom, just like leaves it in, like, so you can run onto it in midfield, and Barco just kind of like cuts through 2 guys, and it was like the pace that Atlanta hadn't seen for 45, 50 minutes. So that's how important that type of player can be. So to your point,
that's what Miggy did his entire tenure, right?
Like you could depend on that guy to just disrupt any shape that your opponent thought that they could depend on. And right now, opponents know that we might not get broken down, so let's just like chill. And a player like Barco, can do that.
Yeah,
so, he needs
especially if they're trying to congest the midfield the way Orlando did, and you've got a player that can run right through it in Barco and force those players to move and adjust and maybe free up somebody like Pitti or Rossetto up front. So.
How do you guys think? Do you guys think we have a chance against? I guess I haven't said anything yet about the predictions, but if we see a match fit Cubo Torres up front as opposed to an Adam John, and then you have Barco playing a full 90, like what does that do to this team in terms of confidence, in terms of pace of play, in terms of variability in their attacking threat? I mean, it seems like the team becomes a lot less predictable going into these games against Miami and Orlando. If those guys I think are playing near 90 minutes.
Well, less predictable, but I don't know if it's more successful or more promising, right? Because like even a healthy Cubo Torres is you're resting on his tenure with players that he had already been playing with, and he's sort of getting into the mold with this new team and getting his feet under him. So I don't know that necessarily guarantees results. I mean, it may be more promising, but I don't know. Go ahead, Dan.
I think we could see Cubo start because Glass said that he's not match fit yet, but we're never going to really know that until we start him in a match and see where he goes.
Yeah, I thought he would start against Orlando, but he didn't.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to see him start. I'm hoping to see Barco start. I feel like the game against Miami could be the most healthiest squad that we've seen in the recent past. So it could be great. I'm wondering. I don't think Inter Miami are as disciplined as Orlando. So when Orlando when we would turn the ball over them, they were pretty good about getting back and maybe giving up a little bit of space just so they could get defensively organized. Whereas Nashville, they would pressure Brad Guzan right off the jump, but then, you've got 2-3 guys up the top and they would leave tons of space for us to pass into. So I don't know. I'm hoping for a win against Inter Miami. It'll make me feel better, but I'm not hopeful of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what we all talked about in the position that Atlanta's in right now is that the sky's the limit and nothing's off the table. And Bill Holcomb kind of mentions it, which is why start John again? You're not going to get what you need with him, and there's nothing left to learn about what he can do. I completely agree. In a season that we've all kind of taken an agreement is kind of a wash, and there's nothing really there to expect or assume about it, why not start somebody new up top whenever you've repeatedly gotten the same results with a consistent face up front?
Sure. And I think that's more of maybe the fans are taking it as a wash. I know I've said I have, but I don't think the players are.
Oh, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No.
I think Gustavo makes a good comment in the trap. We will win because we don't have nothing to lose. We already lost a coach, a style of play, and some good players. Miami's not even a consolidated team. I mean, that's a good point.
It's an interesting point. I would say it's an interesting point because I think Inter Miami is like they're literally in diapers. Like you don't know much about them. They don't even have a sponsor on their shirt yet.
Right. Like not even a real football team.
But I think there's talent there. There, like I said before, there's a developing style of play that they seem pretty confident in. And they can win. I think they can beat good teams. They've been really competitive. They were competitive in their very first match at LAFC. They lost 1-0. So they're not a bad team. I think if you start Cubo Torres against Inter Miami, I think it's an interesting little nugget that he was, LGP's teammate at Club Tijuana. So LGP knows plenty about him. He knows how he plays. He knows that he's a physical striker. He knows that he's a better finisher inside the box. But I think Atlanta United needs that. I think that's the one thing that they just do not have. And you've seen it in some of these matches. Like there's a chance in the box. And the guy that's set to finish is Brooks Lennon, who isn't a finisher. And if you're relying on Adam John, sometimes like as a target striker, he's needing to do a little bit more in build up, and then he has to turn and get into the box. It's just like it just hasn't worked. I was one of the people that when Frank was still coach, I felt like why not just get as much out of Adam John as you can. Like you clearly do not have a replacement for Joseph Martinez. You don't have a like for him. You don't have that type of striker. Do everything you can to build around a target striker. He didn't do that. He told me, then he told me in the interview, he just didn't think that, Adam John was the right striker for him. But Cubo Torres, I think if you start him with Barco, they're going to be a little bit more dynamic. And I think, Cubo is not like this polished, finesse striker. I think he's more of like a very opportunistic,
like a Wando.
Yeah, like he'll crash the goal. He'll mess with his defenders. And you know what? Like Atlanta is lacking a little bit of that too. They don't have that like that spice, that like attitude that a lot of players from the previous cycle were able to kind of drum up and get them through games. So I think Kuba will start. To your point, Stephen Glass doesn't know if he can play 90, doesn't know if he can play 65, but I think at this point you've got to start him.
Yeah. I think the counterpoint is. Sorry, Tim.
Go ahead, Dan.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, I think the counterpoint, Kubo knows what LGP can do as well. So, I mean, he's got that advantage. And, You just hope he can bait him into a red card at some point. and get
That's
a
my
penalty out of
thought
it.
too.
Yeah, that would be a pretty big hope. Yeah, I'm hoping to see the speed out there. I mean, Brian saying Barco, PD, Dom, and Kubo. Give me that all day, every day for the rest of the season, whatever the rest of the season is. Give me all that speed and a guy who's scrappy and industrious inside the box like Kubo Torres has proven to be over the years, especially in MLS. And, you know, I like our chances a lot better now with everybody getting healthy. Not to mention we're essentially getting a fresh player in Franco Escobar coming back off of that retroactive suspension that he served against Orlando. So it'll be interesting to see him come back. I think we get the win against Miami. I think that I mean, to Gustavo's point, they're not a consolidated team. I think that the final product's not there from them. You see flashes of Pizarro in their attack with Carranza, and they look like a team for the future. And I think they're going to be well built going in. They're going to be a fun team to play against and watch us play against, but they're not there yet. And I think that as long as we get, you know, a 1-goal lead, maybe at the beginning, I think that we could probably go in.
I was about to say that. I was like, this is not like super like tactical breakdown type of thing, but I think that is the type of game that whoever scores first could potentially win that game. I mean, they're both teams that can be easily deflated if they're down just because of what's happening around the club. You know, like in Miami, all the buzz, all the hype, and they've won one game. Atlanta United, we've covered everything that's going on, and they've shown they've struggled when they get scored on first. It's something that they have not been able to really overcome. So that first goal in that match is going to be huge. It's going to be huge to see who reacts and how they react. Yeah,
for sure. And I think in 4 years, I don't think I've seen this team be able to come back from a deficit, especially an early deficit. And then to your point, I can't remember
who said Atlanta?
Huh?
Atlanta?
Well, I feel like maybe year one, but
San Jose.
Maybe I'm crazy. Yes, that's true. That's true. Yeah, fair point.
Almost LAFC in Los Angeles.
That's a fair point. I can't remember who said it earlier. It's like one good half doesn't win you a game, but one bad half, like we had against Orlando, will absolutely lose you a game.
Yeah,
like you can't. Like you can. I think if you can avoid having a shit half especially against Orlando again on Saturday, I think that we'd be in decent shape. Daryl DK scares me, especially going into the future. Yeah. That kid he's big, he's physical, he can play a ball, and he can. I don't see any like holes in his game currently, and I don't know how long he stays in Orlando. He is also an example, a shining example, as much as I hate to say it for that team, but he is a shining example of what you can get out of MLS Super Draft, right? So it's
he's a good pickup.
He's the guy that scares me far more than Dom Dwyer. The prospects of Dom Dwyer, even at his best, probably ever did. And he's a guy that I think we have to figure out going into Saturday's match. But yeah, I think we get the win against Miami. I think we lose against Orlando again, unfortunately. But,
yeah. I don't think I'd be so depressed if it wasn't Orlando.
Yeah, it's true. Very true.
I mean, we're
nowhere to go but up.
It felt like on Saturday, considering it was the first time Atlanta United ever lost to Orlando, like clearly the fans, Atlanta was disappointed, but there was a lot of like, right, 2020,
exactly 2020.
So we could throw that up in their fans' face for the rest of
hindsight is never not 2020 anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, Dan. Oh, God.
Hey, it's kind of content you get right here.
Oh, boy. On that note, we're going to wrap it up here. Felipe, where can the people find you and everything that you've been doing lately?
Of course, follow me on Twitter at Felipe Carr, and please subscribe to The Athletic. That's where you can read all my stories. That's why we write at The Athletic for you guys, for the subscribers, for the readers. So jump on my Twitter, go to my profile, hit that link, and subscribe.
Yeah,
absolutely. And what about you boys? Tim, where can they find you?
You can find me just on Instagram at Tim Herb. I don't tweet anymore. I go down I
just use the show page at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even that's hit or miss. Dan, what about you?
You can find me at DNJMS.
Find me at The Architect. That's at _ARC, number 1 TECT. Collectively at Home Before Dark. That's before spelled B and the number 4. Thank you again, Felipe, for coming on with us, man.
We do have one question from our Trap faithful. All right, Brian, yeah. Felipe, what do you order at Arby's?
Oh, that's a good one.
Terrible.
That's a good one.
I mean, listen, it's been a while since I've had Arby's. I mean, growing up, my dad loved Arby's, and that was like, if we wanted fast food, he'd take us there. I just got the number 1, the regular roast beef sandwich. I love their fries, though. They have awesome fries. But I've not had Arby's literally probably in a decade or so. So
well, we'll fix that next time we're at the bins. We'll make sure we get you some.
Oh man, great question. Tommy, you got me on the spot there, man. Jeez. Arby's question.
Yeah, we're not all meat mountain men. As much as we'd like to be.
Exactly.
Sometimes you need a big Montana as your nightcap. That's what. Yeah.
Well, I had a good time. Invite me anytime. This was good. This was fun. I hope the audience had a good time. I think we had a nice little chat.
Yeah, I mean, we normally run about an hour, and we went almost double that. So I think that speaks volumes figuratively and literally. And props on the Larry Peach in the background I see, by the way. It's nice.
Yeah. Great artist.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks again, man. And we'll see you guys next time. As always, be home before dark.
Miami sucks.